Hello, this is Jessi Sletten from Empowering Postpartum. Welcome to the Spanglish World Networks on Zingo TV, channel 250 and 251. Please remember to download both the Zingo TV app on the respective app stores on iOS and Android devices. And while you download, make sure to rate and leave a comment. The app is free, and Zingo TV is also available on Google Chromecast, Amazon Fire and Fire Sticks, Roku and Roku Sticks, and on all smart TVs from 2016 and forward. We are back this week for another amazing episode of Empowering Postpartum with me, Jessi Sletten, your postpartum empowerment coach, helping you feel confident, prepared, and holistically supported for your unique journey into parenthood. And I am really excited to introduce you to my incredible guest this week, Dr. Cindy Rubin, pediatrician and breastfeeding medicine specialist, which I'm super excited to talk about because I've never heard of that specialty before, and I'm super interested in that. So welcome, Cindy. I'm really happy that you are here with us today. How are you?
I am good. Thank you. And thank you for having me. I'm really excited for our chat.
Absolutely. Yeah, me too. So what I like to do when we first start out is just letting you kind of tell us about yourself, what you do, how you got into the work you're doing, and then we'll just kind of go from there and see what we have to share today.
Okay, sounds good. Well, I am a Chicagoan. I guess I'm a Chicagoan through and through. I grew up in a near suburb of Chicago and then went away, tried to get as far as I could, and somehow ended up right back here about a mile from where I grew up.
Oh, I love that.
Funny how that happens.
Yes.
So I'm a pediatrician, and I practiced as an outpatient pediatrician for 13-ish years at a large academic center in the area, and gradually became more and more disenchanted with the traditional system, working within the insurance regulations and having to see patients every 15 minutes. And it just started to burn me out more and more. And in the meantime, I got married and I had 2 kids, and I had my own challenging breastfeeding experiences and became more interested in helping others with breastfeeding and learning more about it. So I started that journey in the midst of all of that and discovered breastfeeding medicine, which we'll talk a little bit more about. But as I became more and more able to help people with breastfeeding, I needed more time with my patients, and I would spend that time with them. And if it wasn't allotted because I didn't know that I was going to be, that it was up during a visit, I would be running behind. And I was just running behind with all my patients because I couldn't do it in 15 minutes. And that just became more and more difficult for me, for my patients, for my staff. And COVID kind of enlightened me as to like the fact that I wasn't going to be able to make it work, basically. And I decided to go with my gut and quit my job and opened my own practice, which is a house call practice. And it's kind of changed a little bit over the last few years, but I am now focusing really on providing the breastfeeding medicine services and also what's called 4th trimester care. So taking care of mom, baby, family in those first weeks after bringing home a baby in their home. And I think this is something that's super important that should be provided for everyone.
Yes.
And is in other countries in some form, at least, but not in this country, the United States, yet. And so it's been a whirlwind, and I'm, learning how to be a business person, which is not something that I ever thought I would do or wanted to do. And there are many days when I still don't really want to do it.
Just making it up as we go, right?
So that's me in a nutshell.
I just absolutely love this journey because I couldn't agree more with the fact that our 4th trimester care is so underserved. It's so neglected. And I think it's incredible that you saw this need. You weren't happy with the way, you were kind of boxed in by the traditional medical, just realm. And you were
Yeah.
like, I'm not doing that anymore. And the fact that you provide in-home services is just absolutely incredible because there is other places in the world that this is normal. Like they have these care nurses come in after birth, after mom and baby are home. They check in on the family system as a whole. They check on the health
Yeah.
birth giver, the baby, and it's really this holistic surrounding of support and care that we deserve and we need. And I just think it's amazing that you are providing that service. I agree, it's so needed. I wish it was more available here in the United States, and it's just not. And we need to really get our what together and start helping our parents. It's in so many ways,
Right.
like across the spectrum. But in the
Absolutely.
meantime, we have services like yours that, give that option. And I think that that's so incredible. Um, I would love to learn a little bit more about this breastfeeding medicine
Yeah.
specialty because I just think this is so needed, and I'm so excited that it is now a specialty available for medical professionals
Yeah.
because not very many doctors or pediatricians or even OBs that I've worked with in the past, the education and the information on breastfeeding is just not there. So I'd love
Yeah.
to hear a little bit more about that.
Yeah. Yeah. So absolutely. I don't even know if I learned really anything about
Yeah.
breastfeeding when I was a med student or a
Mhm.
resident, and started to pick up a little bit of it just when I was in the trenches as an
Right.
outpatient pediatrician,
Mhm.
already having to be helping people. I was learning from my patients.
Yeah.
And then I learned having the experience myself, but even then I felt like I was better equipped to help people after I'd had the experience myself, but I
Mhm.
still could only help them if their experience was similar to mine.
Right.
And many
Mhm.
people I mean, everyone has very different experiences, and so I would
Yeah.
feel at a loss. And so at the time when I started to look for more training, I took the route of becoming a internationally board certified
Mhm.
lactation consultant, which is shortened to IBCLC,
Mhm.
and that provided me with a lot of education, a lot more information, a lot more tips and tricks to help my patients. But along the way, I went to a conference that was a breastfeeding medicine conference, and I
Mm.
really didn't even know what I was getting myself into at the time. I was
Yeah.
like, "Oh, I guess this is like IBCLC for doctors," which
Mhm.
in a way it is,
Yeah.
but it is it is the management of medical problems associated
Yeah.
with lactation. And this is
Okay.
exactly where the people have stopped,
Right.
like lactation consultant
Yep.
care, and then, "Uh-oh,
Mhm.
I have this problem that requires something else, something
Right.
more, some sort of medical workup, intervention, diagnosis, treatment, and nobody here knows what to do."
Yes.
And I'm getting blank stares because I'm going
Right.
to my pediatrician and to my OB-GYN and potentially to my midwife. Midwives
Mhm.
luckily have a little bit more training, but still not
Mhm.
really in the breastfeeding medicine unless they've sought
Right.
it out or practiced it on their own. So
Right.
that's what this education provided, and when I started this, it wasn't a medical specialty. It
Mm.
it was in a way, but it wasn't an
Right.
officially recognized one.
Uh-huh.
And a couple of years ago, the board of what I always have to stop it. The North American Board of Breastfeeding and Lactation Medicine was
Mhm.
formed,
Okay.
and this was created in order to create an official board certification with the
Yes.
goal of attracting more physicians into the field, providing more support for education, but also more recognition, because
Yeah.
people like you don't even know
Mhm.
that it exists. So it
Right.
really is an uphill battle. People don't
Mhm.
even know to Google, I need a breastfeeding medicine doctor.
Right.
And other physicians don't even know that we exist for them to refer to,
Yeah.
because we are so new. And
Right.
so having this recognition or having this certification hopefully will improve that recognition, our ability to advocate in
Yeah.
terms of, the home visits and
Yes.
insurance coverage and all of that. And so we are adding that additional level of support for patients who need it. And not everyone needs it,
Right.
but we are there when it is needed. And I
Yeah. No.
absolutely love it.
That's amazing because, I'm a CLC,
Mhm,
as part of kind of the services I offer. And
mhm.
it's that gap when, okay, I need to stay in my lane. I am not a
Right,
medical professional. This is where I can help, and this is where I clearly can't. And
right.
so it makes it so hard when we're trying to refer out patients or our clients to a medical doctor
Yeah,
who understands what's going on. And then we have that uphill battle of we're actually kind of educating the doctor on what's going
right,
on, but we're really
right.
that's not our
Yeah,
our lane. And so it's just this
yeah,
very and then who gets caught in the middle is the lactating parent, right? And
right.
so it's like they're already bombarded and frustrated and in pain or whatever's going on, and we just need that bridged space where we can get them the help that they need in a
Yes.
medical standpoint. So I think this is incredible, and I do have a quick question. Like, is there some sort of oh gosh, now the word's escaping me, like directory or some sort of thing where we can refer people to for specialists like you?
Yes, right now. So there's a couple of things. I think the best place at the moment is there is an institute um, for the advancement of breastfeeding and lactation education, or
Okay.
IABLE. And if you go to their website, which I believe is LACTED, LACTED.org, I believe.
Okay. Mhm.
Um, and there is a map, so it's called a LACT map, and you can look for either physicians providing or providers providing breastfeeding medicine. You can also look for people who are doing more of the fourth trimester care. There's a few different
Yes.
options. And probably that's the best. That's one of many. There's also the Academy of Breastfeeding Medicine
Yep.
also has a directory, and I think NABLM, which is the new certification, will also have a directory. I'm not sure that it's up yet, but will.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I'll definitely be adding that to my resources.
Yeah.
And anybody watching too, they can know that those are available to kind of, research on their own. And I do know, and I don't know if it's an indicator in the directory since I've uploaded my services there, but Postpartum International has a really great
Yeah.
um, directory as well for service providers that is everything postpartum support. So that'd be interesting to see that as
Mhm.
well, if that was a qualifier or a tag that they've added in.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's great. But I think that this is just such an interesting um, development because I feel like the whole concept of breastfeeding is just one of those things where it's been this mission, this, movement where we're trying to normalize breastfeeding, we're trying to encourage it. But then we're also here today in our topic talking about how we kind of find that balance between, you know, pursuing our breastfeeding goals and wanting to advocate for breastfeeding while also keeping in mind the mental health and the physical
Yes.
health of the, gestational parent, the lactating parent, and how we can really provide support for them in the ways that they need and not necessarily above the goal of trying to breastfeed, right? And so the rest of the show is really going to be us diving into that and why that's so important. And I know we have a few specific topics we wanted to touch on when it came to that whole idea of, okay, mothering or parenting is more than just how much breast milk you can provide, right? And it's more than just ensuring the baby is healthy and getting what they need. We are just as important as the birth giver. So I'd love for you to like kind of, just kick us off with, something that's calling in your heart that you really wanted to touch on and advocate for around this topic. And we'll just kind of go from there.
Sure. I forgot to have all my statistics and everything ready for me, so we'll be a little general here. But
yep.
The United States, I know this is an international broadcast show, but my experience is in the United States, and the United States has the highest maternal mortality rate of any developed country. And if you look at the graph, I mean, we're way higher than the next highest country. And which is incredible. I mean, we spend such a huge percentage of our US money, whatever those words are, for on our medical care, but yet the care is not that great ultimately. And it's not taking everything into account. And women's health in particular is really low on the totem pole. And it's, with pregnancy, postpartum, breastfeeding, menopause is becoming more looked at as well, and has not been taught in the medical field. And women really or birthing people and lactating people really get left by the wayside. And it's interesting, like you said, so we say how wonderful breastfeeding is, and it's a benefit to the baby, and it's a benefit to the parent, to the lactating person, and to our economy, and all of these things. And then we don't provide the support. And many people, we can't take away the fact that it is what it is. It does have benefits that formula will never have. Thank goodness we have formula when we need it. It is life-saving. But what ends up happening is that people know how important it is, and they want to do it. Not everybody, but many people want to do it. They don't know what to expect because they don't get that guidance ahead of time. And then they don't know where to get the support afterwards. And so, again, this breastfeeding medicine is helping to provide more of that, so that people at least can feel that they got the help that they needed. They still may not reach their goals, and not everybody does. But to not reach your goals and feel like you didn't even get help or get the answers you needed, that shouldn't happen. You should be able to get the help, feel supported, and get the help that you need. And unfortunately, breastfeeding and not reaching your goals with breastfeeding, or being stressed out because of breastfeeding, is one of the big triggers, or one of the big things that leads to perinatal mental health issues as well. I mean, it's rare that I see people by the point that they've gotten to who don't have some amount of anxiety or depression or something going on because of what a tough time they're having. And that is one of the highest, reasons for that perinatal morbidity and mortality. And we need to go back to the beginning, and we need to look at what is wrong with our system. And it's the same with like schools, right? We don't pay teachers enough. We don't value this like next generation and the
Right.
people who are nurturing this next generation in so many
Yes.
different ways. Why is that?
Mhm. Right. Right.
I don't necessarily have a
I
solution. I'm
know.
doing my little part
Right.
here, but I can't reach everyone either.
Right.
And so, we need more advocacy and more research and more women in leadership positions,
Yes.
probably,
Right.
to be able to prioritize this more and get the job done.
Absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's this like there's this bigger systemic problem, right? That we do need solutions to. We need advocacy. We need to be moving that dial as much as we can. And then we have like this lower level where, okay, we do have people who can't wait for that, right? And so
Right.
we have services like ours where we're trying to fight the fight on the ground, right? In the trenches. This is what's available. We have programs like mine that create this awareness and, trying to reach more people. And it's hard because, my biggest thing is empowering birth givers, during pregnancy, postpartum, all of that to really advocate for themselves because that advocacy at a systemic level doesn't exist yet. And so we really have to empower ourselves to advocate for ourselves and learn where we can get the education, where we can get the support, creating that supported village before we're
Yes.
and really
Yes.
preparing for postpartum like we do for birth, right? And there's so much focus on planning for the big day of birth, right? And that's like kind of the goal. And then we just don't think about, oh, yeah, there's forever after, right? After
Mhm.
this big day. And a lot of that is then shifted the focus to the baby, right? So we
Right.
kind of become this extension to the baby where in fact we are individual people and our babies are individual people. And so
Mhm.
there's a dyad, right? We need to be treating and caring and nurturing both
Right.
after birth.
Right.
And so, yeah, I just think that the work that you do, the work that I try to do, is that middle ground before we can start really seeing some massive societal changes,
Right.
and really
Right.
giving the tools and resources for people to empower and educate themselves as
Yeah.
well.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely. And it's funny how long not funny. It's
right.
sad how long
Yeah.
it takes for those changes to really
Ugh, I know.
happen.
Yeah.
And so people need to speak out, when you do
Mhm.
have an experience that isn't acceptable.
Yeah.
Ay, 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 there's my dog. Then, people need to know about it so
Yes.
that the change will happen.
Right.
Um, yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Well, and to your point about the perinatal mood and anxiety disorders and the connection with our lactation journey, I mean, that was my journey. Absolutely.
Mhm.
I thought I was prepared for my breastfeeding journey because I took the breastfeeding classes at the hospital and it was something that I knew I wanted to do and I just believed that because my body was capable and had all the things that I thought it needed to be able to do this, it would just come easily and naturally. And it's as simple as just being able to feed my baby, right? And it was not that at all. It was a
Yeah.
learned process for
Yeah.
both me
Yeah.
and my baby. And it was a hard one because I
Mhm.
had support. I had the lactation counselors in the hospital, but it was a very rushed experience. They were attending to a lot of people on the floor. So I didn't get to have the help when I needed it, when I was struggling. And then afterward, I'd have to go to these clinics where there were 10, 12 other lactating parents in the room, and they're trying to get help and support from the one lactation counselor. And it's just like adding to that anxiety and that stress, which of course impacts everything going on with the feeding
Mhm.
situation. And
Mhm.
so it just becomes this really difficult cycle to break out of. And,
Yeah.
breastfeeding grief is a real thing,
Yeah.
and it affects a lot of different lactating parents that I've spoken to. It was something that I struggled with, even though I was able to finally figure out my rhythm with breastfeeding,
Mhm.
there was still a lot of grief that went into that because I had to do things differently
Mhm.
than I thought I should be able to do, right? And
Mhm.
so, is that something that you see a lot with your patients as well?
Yeah, absolutely, and I can give my own personal example as well.
Yeah.
So with my second baby, I had essentially constant plug ducts,
Oof.
um, from around when I went back to work
Oh,
after
yeah.
about 3 months
Mhm.
till she was about 11 months old.
Ugh.
I was kind of at that IBCLC stage in my
Mhm.
own education, and I didn't know that breastfeeding medicine existed,
Yeah,
and gosh, I wish I did because at the time,
right.
because in retrospect, I know what was going on, but at the time, I did
Mhm.
not know why this was happening,
Yeah,
and I was I definitely had postpartum,
yeah.
some sort of mood anxiety disorder,
Mhm. Yep.
but and I was crying
Yeah.
so frequently while I was breastfeeding
Mm.
because it hurt.
Yeah.
I wanted the plug to come out, while I was
Mhm.
nursing, and if it didn't,
Right.
my husband could see just from the look on my face whether I
Yeah.
had a plug or not.
Ugh, yeah.
And I'm using the term plug, it's kind of we're trying to change the
Yeah.
thinking on that, but
Mhm.
for all intents and purposes and people knowing what I'm talking about, we'll say
Yeah.
plugs, but it that was not the experience that I had been
Yeah.
hoping for, and even I, like, being a pediatrician and having some lactation experience, I thought it was gonna be easy the first time with my first baby.
Mhm.
It wasn't, and
Mhm.
I thought, "Well, I had my difficult experience, this one's gonna be
Right.
easy for the second."
I know what I'm doing. My body knows what it's doing.
Right. And, it's those expectations, and so
Mhm.
that's, like, what you were talking about, planning ahead, and I think
Mhm.
it's tough even to figure out psychologically how to prepare people
Yes.
because, I don't wanna scare people
Right.
and they
Right.
decide not to even have a baby when I tell them how
Right.
hard it's going to be,
Exactly.
but I think we all I mean, maybe it's a survival survival sort of instinct to
Mhm.
not know or not
Right.
believe how hard it's going to be because then we wouldn't do it.
Right.
But somehow to have that sort of preparation for how
Mhm.
hard it might be,
Right.
and that it's good to have this support and this support and this support lined up, or at least some
Yes.
names of people who you're going to call, because it
Yep.
just makes it that much easier. It's one less barrier
Yes.
once you do need it, if you've got that plan.
Yes.
And there are so many different ways to support
Mhm.
yourself. But again, just those, if we could do a better job as people in the health professional
Mhm.
field and in the perinatal birth space to better prepare
Right.
people for not just the physical stuff, which people even
Yes.
that aren't prepared enough, but the
Right.
emotional, mental difficulties. Um, I mean, it is probably for most people the most exhausting
Yeah.
time in like, you will just be
Mhm.
exhausted. I mean, most of us do
Yep.
not have experience having to wake up every 3 hours and never getting a longer stretch of sleep than that, and
Right.
that's just the normal care of a healthy
Right.
newborn, whether they're
Yep.
breastfed or bottle fed,
Right.
formula fed or breast milk fed. That's how often they need to eat, and
Yep.
somebody to do that,
Right.
and that's not gonna change.
Mhm.
There are things that we can put into place to make that just a little bit easier for us and at least to know to expect that.
Yeah.
It just
Absolutely.
changes things so much.
Yeah, and, it's something to, like, be aware of and just really shift our mindset around where it's not just caring for the newborn, right? We have our
Right.
own body is going through such an immense healing process
Yes.
after pregnancy itself. Like it's great.
Mhm.
Everything's rearranged, right? So our body
Right.
has to, get back to a, normal
Mhm.
state. Our hormones are in fluctuation, they're trying to balance out, and we're trying to do all these things, and we're healing. We have a huge wound inside our uterus that has to heal. If we're a C-section warrior, we've got additional wounds we have to heal, and
Mhm.
it is a marathon for our body to put all that energy into healing and recovering. And then we throw in this monkey wrench of a tiny little human being who depends on us fully and is up every 2
Mhm.
hours, and we're like,
Mhm.
"This is hard." Like, how am I
Yes.
supposed to heal and, rest and care for myself when I have my baby, right? And so that's when we fall back on that idea and the concept of the village and curating our village in a way where we have the supports we need, even when we feel like that support just doesn't exist. There are
Yeah.
ways to fill in those gaps,
Yeah.
and to help us with that transition a little bit easier. So I'd love to hear from your perspective what some tips are that, parents who are listening out there can do to prepare themselves a little bit better, for the trenches of newborn life.
Right. Right. Yeah. I mean, so first of all, it's just again kind of knowing, just by watching this show,
Yeah.
hopefully you will start to prepare yourself mentally for the fact
Yes.
that this is going to be a marathon. It's going to be
Yeah.
tough and I need to gather my supports.
Yeah.
And what you need is going to be different for everyone,
Yeah.
based on your medical situation, your
Mhm.
personality, all of that. And
Right.
so find out what's available. Um,
Yes.
there, perinatal postpartum support international
Yeah.
is a great resource
Mhm.
for all sorts of different supports, not just mental health supports,
Right.
and really all the other supports that support your mental health,
Yes.
truly. um, and so finding out what's available, because again,
Mhm.
you may not know until it happens which ones
Right.
you're really going to need. So
Mhm.
find out what's available, and if you are in a place that doesn't really have a lot of local support, there is
Yeah.
online support out there. It may not be ideal, but it's
Mhm.
better than nothing.
Right.
Um, physicians, oftentimes, like, we are limited a little bit. I can't
Mhm.
I'm licensed only in Illinois, so I
Right.
can't technically provide medical care outside of Illinois. But
Right.
there are people who do it in more of a coaching fashion. IBCLCs, I believe, can cross state
Mhm.
lines, and
Mhm. Yep.
CLCs, and
Yep.
so there are other ways to do it. And I can potentially help your physician
Mhm.
to help you. I can
Right.
guide them.
Mhm.
There's all sorts of different ways to do things. So
Yes.
find out what's available, have your list,
Mhm.
potentially ask for that support instead of the material sorts of things
Yes.
that people tend to put on their baby registries.
Mhm.
So, we get so excited about, like, we do so much research on what stroller to get, what crib to
Right.
get, what ultimately that really doesn't matter. What
Mhm.
about putting a doula on your baby registry that,
Yes.
te it's such a good idea, and I wish I
Yeah.
had done something like that.
Mhm.
And you can do you can do that sort of thing yourself. There are some
Mhm.
companies out there, some online organizations that kind of streamline that a little bit too.
Right.
But think about that, and putting some sort of support for yourself
Yes.
on your registry, not being afraid to ask for help or
Yeah.
embarrassed to ask for help. We don't
Right.
have to do it all.
No.
Women in particular tend to be like we need to do it all. We need to prove ourselves,
Mhm.
but you can't do this alone. You really can't,
No.
or you're going to get in trouble. You're going to be in
Right.
trouble. And
Exactly.
so, say yes to people when they offer to make you a meal or whatever it may be. My little trick that I say in a lot of places, and I can't remember where I heard it from. I did not come
Mhm.
up with this on my own, so I can't take full credit. But when you do have the baby or before you have the baby, if people come over to visit, they're often bringing, again, those little material things, and,
Right.
they wanna see the baby, they wanna hold the baby,
Mhm.
and that may not be what
Mhm.
you want or need at that time.
Right.
So, keeping a running list, have a little, notepad in
Yes.
your living room, bedroom, kitchen, everywhere, where every time you think of something that needs to be done, some
Mhm.
chore or
Yep.
something, write it down, and then when somebody comes over and says, "What can I do?" have them look at that list and pick something. It's
Yeah.
a lot easier to do it that way and kind of have it
Right.
written down than to say, "Hey, could you go to the store for me?" which can sometimes feel a little awkward. But
Right.
people want to help you, and I think that once they see something like that or hear something like that, they'll be like, "Oh, okay." I mean, it's
Yes.
funny, I was just talking to somebody, a patient yesterday about how, like, they were commenting on how their mother or their mother-in-law is not always that helpful when they come over,
Mhm.
and, why is that? They were they had
Right.
newborns once too. You
Right. Yeah.
forget how hard
Right.
it is,
You
and when
do.
you're in
Mhm.
that different role, you start to feel like, "Oh, they just wanna show off the baby." It becomes about the baby, like you
Yeah.
said.
Right.
And I think we as the visitors too need to know that this mother
Yeah.
is going through a healing, or this or birthing person is going through this healing process, and we
Yes.
need to allow that, and we need to prepare ourselves to give ourselves grace when it's not
Yes.
going as smoothly as we thought it would be. And
Yeah.
another thing is to consider having some sort of prenatal mental health
Yes.
support.
Yep.
You don't
Mhm.
need to have a mental health diagnosis to get
Right.
therapy,
Yeah.
and everything's going to change. So just getting
Mhm.
some tips on how to address and handle stress that you've never experienced
Yep.
before, how it could be just you yourself having therapy like that, or you with your
Mhm.
partner, because everything's going to
Yes.
change for them, everything's going to change
Mhm.
for the dynamic between you two, your
Right.
roles are going to change, and to get a little bit of help thinking about that and unpacking it before it
Mhm.
happens,
Yes.
as well as afterwards, can prevent you from getting into a darker place.
Yes.
And many people don't reach out for that kind of support until they're
Right.
already really in trouble.
Right. And what's really hard when we talk about these morbidity rates and all of these issues that mental health struggles have impact on when it comes to the birth giver. A lot of times when you're in that state, and I'm speaking from personal experience as well as professional experience, but you're so in it that you don't know how to even advocate for that help. And so that shame and guilt cycle starts happening. And so many people don't even say I'm struggling, don't even get the help that they need. I mean, the stats that we have on, PMDD rates and or depression rates and anxiety rates and all these things are honestly low because
Yeah,
they're under
reported.
reported,
Yeah.
and so it's hard because if we're attacking this from all sides, right? If we're being looking at I always say postpartum wellness and health is preventative health, and we need to
Yes.
start thinking of it as that, because
Yes.
if we're only in this reactionary state, that's when people slip through the cracks. That's when we're not getting the support we need because it's just too difficult to advocate for yourself when you are depressed or you are so anxious you can't even leave the house. All these things can happen where getting that support is now seeming like it's impossible. It's not. And if you're in this state, there is always help for you. But if we can work toward being it a more preventative thing and a more proactive approach, the better we are going to be overall,
Yeah.
we are transitioning into this huge life change, right? It is.
Yeah.
It's this huge transition, that one of the biggest ones we'll ever experience in our life, and it impacts everything. We don't give birth in a vacuum, right? Like, it impacts
Right.
everything in our life, our relationships, like you said, our body, our mental health, our connection with the outside world, and everything in
Mhm.
it, and then our connection to ourselves, our identity shifts, and all these things. So we need to start planning for it like the huge event that it is, and not just say, oh, I'll figure it out along the way. There is some of that,
Right.
but there are things
Sure.
that we can do to prepare ourselves for sure.
Yeah, and we as health professionals can make it a priority to ask.
Right.
Ask how
Yes.
people are doing. I mean, I can't tell you
Yes.
how many times I asked, just in my
Mhm.
years as a pediatrician, seeing people in those first days after coming home with a baby, and asked, "How are you doing?" And they say, "Fine." Or they
Right.
fill out their postpartum depression score and it
Mhm.
says, it's a 0, like, they are
Right.
completely fine. And then the more we talk,
Mhm.
the more they start to share, and
Yeah.
by the end of the visit, they're in tears,
Right.
thankfully.
Yes.
Thank goodness, because they're sharing
Yeah.
how much they are not okay. And
Right.
if they don't share, I don't know, and I can't
Yeah.
help.
Right.
And, we as pediatricians are really on the front lines. New
Yes.
parents see us more frequently than they do their OBs, at least for routine care.
Yeah.
And, again, the system is
Right.
not great.
Another thing we need to fix, but
Right.
yes.
Well, and it gets fixed in these little bits, but then people
Yeah.
don't think about it completely. It
Right.
is now recommended, like the
Mhm.
American College of OB-GYNs recommend there being a 2-week visit postpartum
Mhm.
for everyone, not just
Right.
C-section deliveries, as well as the 6-week
Right.
postpartum visit. But most OBs are not
No.
doing this yet because
Mm-mm.
they're not getting paid, because
Right.
most births are paid for, like, in a package deal kind of
Mhm.
thing, and
Yeah.
they haven't made it, just that little bit more reimbursement to cover that one visit. It may sound like nothing for one person, it's not,
I
a
know.
huge loss if you don't get paid
Right.
for it, but for all of the people in your practice, for you
Right.
to not get reimbursed, it's not sustainable
No.
unless it gets paid for.
Right.
Um, and then the OBs are seeing, like, so many people in a day already that they don't have the
Right.
time to delve into that even when they do have the appointments.
Right. Yes.
And, yeah, so having somebody that is going to be definitely helping you to address those things,
Yes.
and again, to not feel that shame. I mean, it's gonna be impossible to not feel any of that. I mean,
Right.
we're here,
Yep.
but
Right.
to allow for the fact that it's not uncommon, it's
Yeah.
not abnormal, it's actually quite normal,
Right.
and it's okay to get the help that you need.
Yeah. You deserve it. Your family deserves it. For me, like, one of my biggest um challenges, one of my most heartbreaking experiences with my first birth was I was so mentally just not good, not in a good place at all, with my postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety, my breastfeeding challenges, all these things. My physical health wasn't great because I wasn't sleeping. I wasn't nourishing my body with the right foods that I needed to replenish my lost, nutrient stores, all
Yeah.
these things that I had no idea about. I didn't know any of this, right? And that impact was so powerful that I don't have memories for the first
Mm.
6 months of my oldest life. I can look back at
Mhm.
photos, I can see that I'm smiling on the outside. I
Mhm.
can have these posts that I look back on in Facebook, but I don't truly remember
Yeah.
a lot of what happened in those first 6 months, and that is
Yeah.
heartbreaking, and that
Yeah.
is what I'm trying to help fix for others on this path where it's like, we want you to be present. We want you
Right.
to be whole and well, and you deserve that, and to be able to do that, we do have to be intentional. We
Yes.
just do. And I wish it didn't fall so heavily on us as the birth givers, like we've talked about this whole episode. We have to get our crap together as a society and have the legislation in place and have, all these things that make it easier and more accessible. But in the meantime, we have to be more intentional about our
Yes.
own journey and take back that little bit of control we do have by empowering ourselves and setting the resources up ahead of time, for sure.
And actually, another point that goes along with that is when you're going into a second, third, fourth, whatever delivery, if you have had extreme challenges and difficulties in the past, this next experience is going to bring all of that back up.
Yes.
And so that prenatal counseling that can be so important for you to, and you can have truly PTSD triggered by going through it again. And, we think, that won't happen again. Right. Well, maybe that will or won't, something else might. And even if it's technically from the outside a perfectly lovely, healthy experience, if you're still dealing with your last experience, it may not feel that way to you. So it's really important to deal with that ahead of time. And that will allow you hopefully to be more present. And I had, again, my patients teach me, and I remember, one thing that is really important to me in how I practice is not to put my own, goals on other people. My job is to help them reach their goals, which may be changing over time. And sometimes it's hard to know, people want to please me. People if they stop early or whatever. I want to support people in what they need. And I had a patient once who was struggling. I think she was I can't remember the exact situation, but she was struggling. And I was trying to help her, and I was trying to feel that out along the way. Like, where are we? Where are you? And I wasn't getting the impression that she was feeling in any way like it was time to stop. And she was still asking for help with the lactation stuff. And so I was helping her. And at some point she comes back for, I think it was the 6-month checkup, because I was her pediatrician, not just helping with breastfeeding. And she came in and she said, "Dr. Rubin, I stopped entirely. Don't be mad at me." So first there's that, like, I'm not mad at you. I'm not mad at you at all. But she said, "I have never been happier. I realize now how I was not bonding with my baby. I was not enjoying my baby. Now I am enjoying it. I'm developing a relationship. I am loving life now that I have been able to let that go." And I felt so bad that I had let it get as far as it did. And I know that that's silly. That's putting my own guilt on, that she needed to get to a point where she was ready for that. And she did, thankfully, without too much of my help kind of guiding her there. But that was a really important lesson for me to learn and to watch her go through that. And thankfully she was strong. Hopefully I would have done that myself at some point. But yeah, I mean, we have to learn from those experiences and try to take them to heart in order to help other people.
And sharing those stories, so that does give that normalization to the experience that isn't perfect, right? Because there is no perfect postpartum. There is no perfect birth. there's beauty in the imperfections, but the places where there are cracks is where we need the support to help
Yes.
us fill in, right? And so
Yes.
that support system is key. And I know we're running a little short on time, so I'd love for you to just share, Dr. Rubin, where people can connect with you, maybe, follow you if you give any important educational information, just where they can connect with you if they want to get in touch.
Sure. Yeah. Well, the name of my practice is In Touch Pediatrics and
Mhm.
Lactation, and I am in the Chicagoland area. So my website is easy, www.intouchpediatrics.com. And really all of my social links are there. So that's probably
Okay,
the
perfect.
best place to go. I
Yeah.
do have a YouTube channel where I house all of my old all of my Facebook and Instagram posts. I really try to put out as much free, accessible information as I can, both in terms
Yeah.
of breastfeeding, but also being a parent and dealing
Mhm.
with that.
Yeah.
Experience and giving yourself grace. So you can find me that way. You can email me, call me, text me to reach out. I'm happy to help if you're local, but also to help you find something that is local to you if you're looking
Yeah.
for somebody.
That's great. Well, thank you so much for spending your time and expertise with us this morning. This was a
You're
great conversation.
welcome. Yes,
And I
absolutely.
really appreciate, you taking the time out of your day and sharing all of the wealth of knowledge. And hopefully everybody viewing got something out of this great episode. And we will be posting replays as usual. So look out for that. If you're joining us late and you were like, I missed it, you can always watch the replay. So we'll be posting that. And just as a reminder, Empowering Postpartum Coaching guides new and pregnant moms and birth givers through the transition into motherhood so that they can bond with their baby without sacrificing their own self-care. So if this is something you're wanting for your postpartum, shoot me a DM on Instagram at empowering_postpartum, and we can chat about how I can help support you through your journey. And
Put it
remember
on your
this.
registry.
Yes, exactly. Registry is perfect. Actually, that's what I did for my postpartum doula. Like you were talking, I was like,
Good.
I earned that for the second time around.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
But remember, this show can be heard on Spanglish Radio Network. Please check out spanglishworld.ca for all the news and programming. Spanglish World. Watch it, hear it, read it, download it, and live it. And we'll see you all next time. Thank you.
Thank you.